Welcome to CISO's Insiders Podcast, powered by GRC Consulting. In this podcast, we'll be interviewing leading CISOs and security leaders in the industry for light, eye-level conversations. Here, they share advice and tips, talk about their biggest accomplishments and failures, favorite drinks, key influencers, and much more. We encourage you to walk away with at least one insight that will help you better yourself or your business. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more content, please check us out on social media.
Good morning, everybody. Today we will be speaking with Olu. Looking at your bio, I see that you held a few positions as a network engineer almost 2 decades ago, or even a bit more than that. And then I think around 2004, you made a transition into what is now called cybersecurity. Back in the day, it was called either information security or IT security and risk management. And I see you held a couple of positions in that role. In that space. And right now, I believe you're the Chief Information Security Officer of the NYC Department of Transportation. And I'll pass the baton to you if you want to step in and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Olusegun Opeyemi-Ajayi, Olu for short, for obvious reasons. So we'll keep it at Olu. I'm the Executive Director, Chief Information Security Officer at New York City Department of Transportation. I've been in information technology / security for over 20 years. Spent most of my life, earlier years in startup companies, and then moved to the public sector, where I've been for the last 18 years.
Okay, thank you for that. And thank you for providing your full name as well, because as I told you before we started recording, I wouldn't be able to pronounce it. Before we dive right in, I just wanted to do a quick recap. So as our listeners know, this podcast main objective is to learn more about the individuals behind the steering wheel or currently occupying the CISO seat. The podcast is focused, this episode would be focused around about you, not specifically about the organization that you're employed with. And the main intent here is to share experience and to learn from your experience for our listeners to benefit from. With that, I always like to ask a couple of icebreaker questions here. So if you could provide us with your marital status and favorite drink.
I'm married. Been married since 2001. I have 2 boys. Favorite drink, I'm a teetotaler. I don't drink alcohol. So depending on my mood, I could go for pineapple juice or cranberry and orange juice.
Really?
Boring, but that's it.
But are you referring to the boxed versions of these juices or the fresh ones? Like, do you squeeze them yourself?
Yeah, the fresh one preferably. But if I go out, I just take whatever they have.
Got it. Okay, let's dive right in. If there's one thing you wish you'd known before you began your career, what would that be?
I'll say the importance of work-life balance. Obviously, I started my career as a network engineer, and back then it was a 365-day operation, and it was like I was permanently on, and I didn't really realize how intense it was until one day when I went to the restroom and I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to be doing there. I was just so that's when I realized I needed to take it easy. So it's important to understand, obviously when you're much younger, you have enough time and energy for that, but it catches up to you. So just understanding, how to manage that, I think that has been one of the, things, that I've learned in my career.
But, let me ask you a follow-up question, because I think this is a global issue. Many people are suffering for that. Do you have, I'm sure you have your own quick tips on how to accomplish that, to maintain a work-life balance?
Yeah, I think, it's understanding the job itself, and how to properly manage and to, compartmentalize, to keep it in a compartment, kind of, right? Obviously, you can't finish the job. There's always something to be done. But, it's just being able to prioritize what needs to be done and understanding the business environment so that you can deal, in an appropriate way where you're still able to manage expectations, but do it within reasons, right? And to be able to, let people understand that, there's life after work, right? Because sometimes, you're so engaged, you're responding to emails at 2 a.m., because, you think, you have to respond, and, the people you're responding to probably won't check it till 8 a.m. in the morning anyway,
Mm-hmm.
So it's just having that understanding that, you have to take time off. It has to be a deliberate thing. You just have to make time, to be able to spend it with the family, or to just take time, to just do something leisurely. Just take, because if you're not fully engaged, your personal life, it's going to catch up eventually, with your professional life.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. And looking back at your career, what would you say your biggest failure was?
If I look at it professionally, I think it's probably not understanding the business, not, taking time to understand, what the business is, and building relationships, in that environment, right? Sometimes you get caught up with just what you're doing. You don't see the clear picture, right? Whether you're in IT or in security, you want to put additional controls because you think you have to do it right now, right here. So it's really understanding the business and building relationships so that, the decisions that you make, you try and be more objective, and you make sure they align, with the business goals and with the organization's mission. I've had, while trying to put, especially in security, you're trying to put all these controls in place right now, right here. And then you start annihilating people, right? Because they think you don't get it, you don't understand the business. And you're just looking at it from a technical control or administrative control, but you have to be able to understand the bigger picture,
Yeah, and just as a quick follow-up on that, because I've been getting a similar response from a lot of my interviewees. Why do you think that is? That at the beginning of their careers, security professionals feel, it catches up to them and they realize it only later in the game, but they don't understand the business. What do you think the reason for that? What's your take on that?
Well, for me, I think, for me personally, I think it's because coming from a background of a network engineer where you're more behind the scene, you're just configuring routers and firewall and switches, you don't really get to interact with the business, right? So, it more or less gives you a tunnel vision, right? Now I'm in security, I'm in governance, and I'm just looking at the policy and I'm saying, checklist, you have to do ABC, right? Without really understanding the reasons why you should have an exception, right? So, I think for a lot of people who come in, especially the ones who have technology background, they're always looking at it from just that angle, right? So it takes a while to warm up. I remember, when I got into management and my CIO said, oh, Olu, you have to do a presentation, to senior leadership next week. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure I really want to do that, right? Because I've not been having that interaction, right? Of standing in front of people and talking about things, in a meaningful way that people who are not technical will understand, right? So I had to build that up, and I've been fortunate to have, bosses who were more interested in developing those soft skills, right? So, it helps, down the road when you start, getting that experience of dealing with people, especially on the business level, but historically, when you're there and you're put in a box, you're just doing hardware stuff or software stuff. You don't really get that interaction.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that insight. What would you say then that your biggest accomplishment was?
I think my business, I'll say the ability, to evolve, right? And then to understand how you can make a difference, in an organization. When I was working in networking, I got in there and, they had so many, consultants. They had, a company that was managing, the infrastructure resources, and I looked at it and it was costing a fortune, and I looked at the service, and I was like, why are we paying this guy so much money? I mean, they're so expensive, you know, but they were concerned, you know, that was the network director. They were like, oh, we relied on these guys, you know, if something happens, we can point the fingers at them. And I said, no, you know, I'm a network engineer. I'll take the responsibility. Let's get additional resources and we can save all these millions, you know, and we're able to do that. You know, we put all the necessary, you know, controls in place, got the necessary resources. And I mean, we're able to save, you know, quite a number, I mean, a lot of money, right? So to me, I think that was probably the biggest accomplishment because I could see it in dollars and cents, right? And the organization was able to see the savings. It was tangible.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, looking back at your career, and for our listeners out there that want to pursue a career in cybersecurity and maybe eventually, you know, holding a CISO role, what would your advice to them would be? Like, what should they do? How should they start in order to pursue a career that eventually would be similar to yours?
Yeah, I think, you know, like they say, you know, knowledge is power, right? So if you're interested in cybersecurity, you need to start reading up on, you know, on the news, right? You know, if there's a data breach, you know, read up on it, find out what happened, how it happened, you know, what could have been done, you know. So it's a little bit of research, you know, check out the certifications that are out there, right? You know, because security has evolved so much now. Unlike when I first started, you know, you could be a penetration tester now, you know, you could be an application security person now, you know, you could do governance, risk and compliance, right? So it's so much diversified now. So you have to do a little of research and try and figure out, you know, what exactly, you know, do you want to do? You know, are you a technical person that you want to work in the background, or do you want to, you know, work more in security audit, you know? So that will be it, you know, do a lot of reading, check out the certifications that are out there, you know, and, you know, if you're still thinking of going to college, you know, then, you know, check out computer science or management information security, or systems rather, or information technology, a degree in that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So basically education, better educating yourself, researching. I would even add for the purpose of, you know, determining what is of interest to you, right? Because as you mentioned, you could be a pen tester, you can be an application security personnel or staffer, you could be a SOC analyst. Right. There's many ways to start, but I think what you're alluding to is that first you need to understand what your passion is. So, right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's not really all about, you know, making the money. You have to make sure that, you know, it has to be something that you're going to enjoy and want to do for a long time, you know, because especially in security, you know, you have to read a lot, you know, you have to find out what's going on out there, you know, you have to, you know, there are webinars there, the seminars, you know, you have to be engaged, you know, so it helps if you are passionate about it.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about, you know, start talking a bit about the role of the CISO. Now, a lot of organizations position the CISO as part of the IT organizations. In your opinion, like, what are the pros and cons about it? And in general, what do you feel about that structure?
Yeah, I think you know, I belong to the camp of people who say, you know, the CISO should not report to, you know, to IT or to the Chief Information Security Officer, right? I'm one of those, right? And, you know, it's based on experience of having, you know, worked as a network engineer and then having moved into security. Obviously, there are pros, you know, if you report to, you know, to the Chief Information Security Officer. And one of that is, you know, you get to experience the challenges that IT has in real time, right? You know, you get to build relationships too, you know, with the folks in IT, you know, because, you know, it's not easy being a Chief Information Security Officer. In most organizations, you know, the challenges are the same: legacy, you know, applications, legacy systems, you know, end of life operating systems, you know, end of support operating systems, you know, which creates security challenges, right? You know, and the CIO is in the middle of all that, you know. So, you know, working, you know, in IT makes you understand, you know, what those challenges are, you know, and it helps you build relationships too, you know. I mean, those are the pros, right? But for me, you know, the cons are, you know, when you report to the Chief Information Security Officer, it affects your objectivity a little bit, right? You know, because you see all those things, and, you become more sympathetic to them, right?
Yeah.
And, dealing with the CIO, you have this discussion and it's like, yeah, how difficult it is to get money, how difficult it is to get the resources and all that, right? So, that might dull your objectivity, that's part of it. And then, sometimes it becomes adversarial, right? People in IT say, hey, you're one of us, why are you always giving us a hard time, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're reporting outside our line, it's easier for you to exert more pressure, right? You say, hey, listen, I understand I'm sympathetic towards these things, but, we have to be compliant, right? If there are regulations involved, and then, it's easier for you to talk to senior leadership and be more open about what the challenges are, right? Because, the CISO might see some security gaps and, might want to gloss over it, and it's not because they don't really want to do anything about it, but, resources are an issue sometimes, right? But, when you're outside that, it can be more objective, and it's easy to be able to tell senior leadership, yeah, we have all these gaps, right? And, it's going to cost XYZ, to be able to fix those gaps. And these are the risks that are involved, right? So, reporting to the chief, financial officer or the CEO or somebody like that, I think should be the ideal case. But, it's just the way, that position has evolved, and it just evolved under the Chief Information Security Officer.
Yeah, I completely agree with your stance, and obviously there are all kinds of rebuttals to that, and there are numerous examples of a successful organization who placed the CISO in the IT organization. But I think eventually, at the end of the day, it comes back to your relationship with the CIO, their commitment to the level of cybersecurity and compliance, and then again, personal relationship as well, and chemistry. But again, I understand all the pros and cons that you were talking about. And personally, I feel that the CISO should be outside of the IT organization, but it's not the right or wrong question here, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. My present job when I joined, and even my last one, the CIO was like, hey, listen, I'm just giving you free range, right? Just make sure you look me in, right? Let's have that communication constantly going. So when your CIO has an open door policy, and is a believer in security, because that's the key, right? If he's a believer and is a driving force in security, then at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, right? The only place where it matters is if your CIO is not an advocate for security or doesn't really,
exactly,
is not passionate about it.
Yeah, exactly. That's where the problem begins. But looking again, talking a bit about your role, you needed to learn a lot because you transitioned from being a network engineer into an information security professional. Like, how did you do it? What were the best resources that have helped you along the way?
Well, I think relationships helped a lot, because when I was in networking and security started evolving, and I was working with different vendors, right, and talking to them, they were able to steer me in the right direction. Hey, this is evolving. They were trying to sell products and sell solutions, right? But at the same time, they were giving me their roadmap, right? And that gave me an understanding of where security could go, right? And then, advising on, certifications, on training classes, on various courses, on workshops, so yeah, that played a major role, in the direction of me going from, being a network engineer into going to, into cybersecurity, information security, now cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm. And do you think certifications of some sorts, I know you've discussed this, do you think that's like just a supporting pillar, or is it like mandatory in your opinion?
For me, I would say it's mandatory now. because the certifications have evolved too. Back in the day, you just had to like memorize and all that. There's some certifications right now where, there are case studies. You need some real life experience. And then it just shows to me, aspiration, right? That you made that extra effort, to say, what, yeah, I like this, but hey, I'm going to use my initiative and just, go take a certification. It doesn't really mean that because you have a certification, you're going to be a better, cybersecurity person, but just on certain level, it just shows initiative, right? I mean, for me, I took a lot of certifications because, I like to take, tests periodically just to test because it forces me to read, right?
Yeah.
So, I remember, because I took my CISSP like in, 2009, which was a long time ago. And then, I realized, I wasn't really, reading as much as I should, then I said, oh, you know what, maybe I need to take the, certified information security management, certification. And then after a while, I'm like, well, maybe I should do this, because it forces me to read, right? And to just know what's going on.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any one common myth about this profession, the cybersecurity space, that you wanted to debunk?
Yeah, certainly, that security gets in the way of business, right? That it's an hindrance, right? Everybody, they look at security, and they think, oh, well, you're just trying to put roadblocks, hey, there's a way to simplify this. Oh, well, yeah, we've been doing it this way and nothing has happened, right? But I always tell them, because nothing has happened doesn't mean something is not going to happen, right? So I think that's the biggest challenge, of people just thinking, oh, security is, is an hindrance to business and to, working efficiently, but I think people are beginning to come to the realization that, security, because even in their personal lives, right, there's been so many breaches now, right? I think I'll be surprised if there's someone whose data has not been breached at one point in time, whether, you shop at Home Depot or you have a Yahoo account, So I think people are beginning to understand the importance of security, and that can only go a great way in being helpful.
Well, it's definitely much more mainstream nowadays, cybersecurity and breaches and hacks, than what it was like 22 years ago when I started, when you had to explain what was information security to your family and friends. But yeah, for sure. Now, talking a bit about the industry, what, in your opinion, what do you think are the main concerns that CISOs nowadays have in general?
Yeah, it's the same thing, threats, the attack surfaces has just increased, greatly now, right? Back in the day, you had a VPN, for remote access and everything was okay, back in the day, you had endpoint security, I have McAfee, all is well, but things have changed so much now. There's, now you have to worry about cloud. Now you have to worry about, IoT devices, operational technology, So, and the threat just keeps evolving. So obviously, now you have state actors, you have activists, So right now, it's you just worry about, when is it going to be your turn, right? Because no one can say they're 100% secure. It doesn't really matter how much you spend or how many people you have under you, right? There's always that chink in the armor that somebody is willing to explore. So yeah, threats. Incident response. Are you sure you're testing your incident response plan? Are you, do you know what to do when the inevitable happens? Right. So, you worry about that. You want to make sure that it's not just, the IT people that know what to do, but even the business, so you have to build up relationship, so that when something happens, you know who to call, and you've tested that out, so that's always at the back of your mind. We don't want anything to happen, but if it happens, do we have everything in place to be able to recover and recover quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then,
yeah, please.
go ahead.
No, please finish your
Yeah, and then
thought.
finally, education, awareness, and training, right? You're always still on edge with, no matter, you do phishing campaign, you do all the, but somebody is always still clicking on something, right? So you always still worry that, hey, what can you do to just improve that, right? So that people can always be on guard.
Yeah. And, as you said, you can never be 100% secure no matter how you spend. And I would even argue that at some point there's a diminishing return on, if on the amount you spend to the actual value that it keeps contributing. Yeah, and it's always a challenge. I'm assuming for you guys to align the budget and prioritize the items that you need to be dealing with. I can only assume how you're doing it, probably based on a risk risk management sort of system. And but yeah, it's definitely challenging, especially with the evolving threats, because you can't necessarily know how to quantify them as they evolve, right?
Right.
So in your opinion, what are the most important skills CISOs nowadays should have?
Business skills, definitely. It's not just all technical. You definitely have to have some technical knowledge to be able to deal with the folks in IT. But the business skills now you have to be able to, talk to the guys in the, at the C level, right? And to be able to explain risk to them in a way that they can relate to. Not just charts of the number of incidents and vulnerabilities and, firewall hits and things like that, but to be able to talk about it, on an enterprise risk level, how does it really affect us, right? And what is the consequence, right? So yeah, it's just developing those soft skills, being comfortable, with senior leadership, and being able to articulate those views in a way that they can understand and relate to.
So business skills, but also you're saying, I mean, in order to be able to talk with management and convey whatever it is in the business language, you also need to have some kind of a technical understanding to be able to serve as a translator. Is that correct? Is correct assumption?
That's correct. Yeah, because now you have to be the bridge between information technology and the business, right? You have to be able to, sit, straddle those two lines, right? And be able to bridge it in a way that, becomes seamless, right? Where your, CEO is comfortable enough to call you to say, hey, listen, I read about, this breach at, some entity, yesterday, I mean, what's going on, and then, you can have a conversation about it in a way that can reassure them, but still let them understand that there are threats out there, right? So that's kind of relationship you want to build, where they're comfortable to be able to ask questions, and you can assuage their feeling while still telling them that, hey, listen, there's still a lot of threats out there.
Yeah. And I think what we've seen in the past decade or even 15 years is the transition of the CISO role into, as you alluded to, into a more business type of role. Because back in the day, it was what we used to call network technicians or even keyboard technicians at some point being promoted and getting to, basically take ownership of the information security posture of an organization. And we just spoke about, the need to be business oriented and also speak the technical language as well. But in your opinion, where's this role, the CISO role, is going? Looking, into the future for like 5-10 years from now, what would we see in your opinion?
Well, you know what, to me, I think it's really going to shift more to the business side than the technical side. I think I won't be surprised if, in the next 4 or 5 years, you start seeing people who are just business people, acting as chief information security officer and just aggregating information, right? And being able to interpret that to the board. I mean, now you're seeing that even with some chief information officers, right? Some of them have limited technical expertise or knowledge, right? And I think, that's, where it's really is going to be going more towards the management and the business side than the technical.
Okay. And, picking up on that thread, what's next for the cybersecurity world, in your opinion? What will we see next?
Well, that's the thing, like they said, the more things change, the more they remain the same. And that's it for cybersecurity. It's still going to be, people coming up with, newer products, whether it's software, whether it's hardware, to address the same problems, right? Because it's the same problems in different ways, right? Ransomware started, I don't know, 20 years ago, and it's still here in different forms, right? It's just how, it's been delivered that is changing a little bit, right? And then, a few years ago was business email compromise, right? So, people are just going to be coming with, the technology is still going to be, evolving around those same challenges that we've had, really. Because if you look at history, it's still the same vulnerabilities that we're addressing, right? We have all these tech companies that that we buy services and products from, and every week they're telling us there's one vulnerability or the other, and all we do is whack-a-mole, right? Every day I'm talking to the guys, hey, make sure this is patched, there's a new one, hey, make sure it's patched, and then the following week, it's the next one. So I think it's going to be innovation in hardware and software, security hardware and software and solutions, and then as we're seeing it now, more managed services. People are like everything, people are going to the cloud. Maybe more companies will be going to more managed services than having their own in-house staff do the work. Having fewer people in-house and just working more with third parties.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about maybe more like a larger transition into SaaS-based services and products. How do you feel about the virtual CISO offerings out there for smaller organizations? Do you think that would grow, or will that shrink, in your opinion?
No, I think that will probably grow. Because right now, although it's been around for a few years, it's still in its infancy, right? There's still a lot of, especially, when you look at healthcare, where you have HIPAA laws, and there's so many, primary care physicians out there, a lot of, small network of doctors out there, who at some point will start, looking at those services, just to protect themselves. So I think there's still opportunity for growth in that field.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. In your opinion, any trends around budget planning and changes between before the pandemic and post-pandemic?
I haven't seen much of that, at least in the public sector. And I think that's because, in the public sector, especially for the cities, they lost a lot of revenue during COVID. I think it's been more about the same, but I have a feeling, maybe in a year or two, it might start changing, they might start spending more money. I mean, the only thing I've seen really is really more of attrition on the, on the people side, as people go, in search of more remote work now, than coming to the office 5 days a week. So I think the challenge really is backfilling positions right now, but in terms of new needs, especially for products and services, I haven't seen much change in that.
Got it. Yeah, and I agree with you. Like, people want to work remotely nowadays. I know a lot of a bunch of people from New York have moved to Florida. I know a lot of people on the West Coast moved to either Montana or Texas, Idaho, Oregon, all kinds of other places rather than California. So I do see this shift as well. Now, what would you define, having taken into consideration all that you've said around the trends in the industry? What would you define as innovation in this space?
That's a tough one, I think more of the vendors going to cloud services now to provide their services. A lot of the vendors that we have right now are trying to move away from on-prem deliveries, right? Everybody's trying to go into the cloud. I think a lot of them are, the adoption has been slow, but that's what I'm seeing right now. People are trying to provide, They don't really want to go into the, hardware software business, on-prem anymore. They're trying to build out their cloud presence, and encourage, their present vendors to make that migration.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But and I've heard all kinds of doomsday scenario a few years ago that eventually the cloud would shrink and everybody will go back to on-prem because of rising costs. Did you see that happening? I personally don't, but just asking for your opinion.
Well, I see that happening, but it's going to be negligible, right? Because a lot of people are committed to the cloud right now, and with that commitment to the cloud, some people have reduced their footprint a lot, so that's always the problem, right? The cost of, okay, all right, now I have to hire more people in-house to manage this stuff, and people don't really want to go through that. But I've seen, I've talked to a few colleagues that, made that initial leap to the cloud and are gradually, bringing some stuff back in, internally, but I think, the horse is already out of the barn,
Yeah.
So I don't see a radical change, and, the way technology works, the cloud companies will continue to evolve too and try and figure out a way where they can reduce cost. Because what people have noticed right now is, you come in, thinking it's going to cost X amount of money. And then before you know it, it's nickel and diming, now you have to pay for everything that you never thought about. And then, but on our side, the good thing is, before a lot of those things, you couldn't consider to be capital expenditure, right? So that's changing, so without change, that will be helpful, in keeping, those cloud services going.
Okay, thank you. We're coming to the last part of this episode today. I just wanted to get your thoughts about, vendors real quick. So I'm just gonna ask you a couple of quick questions there before we can wrap this episode up. Now, everybody knows that the vendor relationship could be, how do I say it, could be a bit like hard, stressing, and maybe uncomfortable at times. But
Right.
in your opinion, what is it that you don't want to see in a vendor or a potential vendor?
What I don't want to see, which tends to happen a lot, is, vendors who, oversell their products and their services, right? They tell you can do 10 things when in reality, it can do one or two things very well, right? But they don't tell you that, So, I think that's always been, there's been so many times, in the past and now where we've implemented the technology and then you find out that you're only using like 5% or 10%, of what you can get out of it, because, implementation becomes, so unwielding, and so resource intensive, right? So, I want a vendor that will come and say, listen, I'm really good at this, and that's what I'm selling to you, not that, I can be good at other things and that's what I'm selling to you, So I think that's the biggest frustration I've worked with, I remember my last job, we had a GRC tool for 10 years, we could hardly get it working right. And every year we are paying the subscription fee, right? Because they kept telling us, oh, well, now we're going to give you more resources, it's going to get better now, so that gets pretty frustrating pretty fast.
Okay. So what is it that you do look in a vendor for?
Honesty, integrity, and, providing excellent support. I remember when I was a network engineer, that was what I liked about Cisco back then. Right? If you had a problem and you called the tech support, you were getting the best and the brightest, right? And that was helpful back in the day. And that's what you want, you want a vendor that supports you all the way, not just I'm giving you the product and then, see you in 4 years time or next year when I need a renewal. You want a vendor that is a partner, that reaches out, that provides support, that gives you the roadmap before you start harassing them, right? They're innovative, and they take you along, for the ride.
Yeah. And one of the issues that CISOs are dealing with is a lot of cold calls or cold emails or cold LinkedIn requests by potential vendors. Like, what would be a good way to reach out to you as a vendor, as a potential vendor, that will not put you off?
Yeah, well, I don't mind, and I get that. I don't mind people reaching out on LinkedIn, because, I can go check, if I want to respond, I'll respond, but the emails, I mean, I wake up, I get to work in the office, and they're like 67 emails, man. I spend most of my time on subscribing, so that's the biggest challenge, right? And then, referrals, if you've worked with another agency or you've worked with an entity, um, and you can reach out to them and say, hey, do you know anybody in this organization and all that? And then have that person reach out first to say, hey, because sometimes, vendors reach out to me. If I like the products, I can reach out to a colleague, a professional colleague, and say, hey, you know what? I looked at this security and awareness or phishing campaign, organization, and it's nice. Hey, take a look at it, But chances are, if you're just sending me things cold, chances are, I'm just going to delete it, So I think, professional referral is helpful. Reach out on LinkedIn, put your demo in there that I can click on and see what it's all about. And then if I'm interested, I'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you. What's the best way then to connect with you, both for, listeners, vendors, colleagues, peers?
Yeah, I always go back to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best. Yeah, because I check it regularly. I get the notifications. I can go there, read, see what's going on. So yeah, LinkedIn is always my preferred method of communication.
Okay, and final question before we wrap this up. If money was never an issue, what would you do with your life?
Oh yeah, I'd like to be a philanthropist, man. I like to be able to give money away. I'm from, Nigeria, West Africa originally. So, to be able to go back to, that region and, do some, youth empowerment programs, bring resources from the States, to be able to provide, education, exposure, experience to people back there,
Okay, thank you. That's a lofty goal. I think you have to be very, very rich in order to accomplish something with that. I know, watching that Netflix show probably 2 years ago about Bill Gates. I know he's been involved in providing some solutions for for clean water, and there was another initiative there. But yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of time, effort, and money, obviously.
Yeah.
But thank you for that, and thank you again for accepting this invitation and joining me in our talk today. I hope your answers would help young enthusiasts in this field, and I'm sure that all of our listeners will be able to walk away with at least a couple of items here that provided them value. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it. I've had a good time. I've enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank you.